for different pages. Here's Dr. Gotcha.
Oh, let us know. Okay.
So I would like to call to order this telephonic meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission for July 13, 2020 at 6 p.m. And our first order of business before we shut off our microphones is the roll call.
And in this case,
Our former chair, Tim Gilbert, has resigned, so he is not with us tonight. I am Sid Bremer, the vice chair. Alder Veronica Corpus Dax.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisa Hanson.
Present.
Commissioner Jake Miller. And Commissioner Randy Petrowski.
Present.
And Commissioner Darius or DJ Daniels.
Present.
All right. All accounted for. I would like then to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, I think that was Veronica Corpus Dax with a second from Lisa Hanson. Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Raise your hand if you object. That being the case, we will continue with a request for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, I would recognize Randy Petrowski as the motion maker. Does that mean, Veronica, you could second it? Great. Any objections to that approval? Then we can consider that to also be approved. And we'll continue to our regular order of business. But first of all, I need to ask that anybody who's not speaking now turn off. And let's see. Looks like, oh yeah, the crosstalk went way down. So we have as our first item, consideration with possible action on communication from Alder Kathy Lefebvre to look at residential policy per home storm water runoff. Residences are experiencing rainwater runoff pardon me, from elevated houses because of floodplain building elevation requirements from FEMA. Paul Newmeyer, our staff member, would you be so good as to introduce this item for us?
This request kind of has to do with properties that are located within the floodplain. And floodplain properties are regulated under Chapter 13 or 1300 in our Green Bay zoning code. And those requirements really date back to about 2009, when we did a major update to FEMA maps, adopted maps, and adopting new ordinance requirements for floodplain, kind of a next generation for floodplain. So in my brief report, I just kind of outlined some sections out of the request that are already in place. And they really have to do with the distance from lot lines for drainage, maximum heights for retaining walls, and then the slope that is required from the foundation to the property line. So really the intent here is, although that homes are being elevated, their side slope should generally kind of taper back into the natural grade, and giving them kind of a sense of kind of fitting in, so to speak. So those requirements are already in place. I provided about, I think, 4 or 5 different scenarios that we use for floodplain properties with varying widths or different situations, and those are included within your agenda. I think there might be a couple I included in this report or in the PowerPoint. There we go. These are just some examples of things that we're preparing for when requests come in, that those drainage requirements are in place, the aesthetic is in place to allow this construction within the floodplain. So I did talk to the alderperson about this request. I did pass on the information, and I'm passing on to you. And at this point, we're just recommending that the item be received and placed on file.
Did Alder Lefebvre have any questions or concerns about it, Paul?
Yes, I know what originally started with the people on Reaver Street, someone, and even though they're in the floodplain, it wasn't because of flooding from the bay. It was just that there was a Habitat house that built, and they had to raise up, and then there were the two people in between on the east of that, the property that had, excuse me. I just came from another meeting, and I got to go back. The Habitat house is on the east, and then going west, the two in between, and then the third person had to raise up. He put a garage and he had to raise up, so the two are in between. Now this year, their problem issue last year was the issue they had, because we had so much rain, their backyards were standing water. I mean, a lot of water, puddling, really puddling in their backyard. Even though they're on the alley, there was no drainage into the alley. It was all pooling into their backyards. Now the one house, he is elevated, his house and everything, and his basement was fine, but the other one was a rental, and his basement was getting flooded. So that was the original intent. But then now we got in Vice Chair Bremer, you know that you know the situation on Lakeside. Now we have another one where he is concerned about flooding from the bay itself because he's the lowest elevation house. He's on a slab, and the one next door is going to be building, and so he has to raise all his property up. The other house on the other side, right now, they're higher than he is also. So he already had in April, he had the flooding came in his house. I think he had 6 inches in his house. And now going through FEMA, FEMA is paying for taking the carpet out and all the work that has to be done. But now he's afraid that with that house being built up and everything, the next time, he doesn't know if he gets flooded again. And this time it would probably might be worse because it's only going to go into his property, everything, and that FEMA might not pay for it again. That was the concern that I had. And there must be other areas in the city where people, it's not their fault, you know, and it's not the people who have to build up because that's the new regulations. But there has to be something to help these people so that they don't end up with damages in their house.
Alder Lefebvre, do you have, are you content with the current regulations that Mr. Newmeyer has just reminded us of?
Yes and no. Basically, I think the one on Lakeside would be the one that's really going to be hurt.
In part because the lot itself of the neighbor is so very low and just on the slab, right?
Right. And he cannot afford to raise his house. He just can't. It's unfortunate. And he's the lowest of, I think, anybody on that area.
I think that's possible. Mr. Newmeyer, as I understand it, there is no way to protect what is already threatened by flooding. It's simply to make sure that whatever is being built will not make that threat worse. Is that correct?
I think in a nutshell, yes. I think it's for new construction. Unfortunately, there are several homes that maybe are below the floodplain that are older. But there's also an issue of dike maintenance as well. If there's flooding from the bay, that's not necessarily controlled strictly through the zoning codes. So, you know, our intention here at the zoning code is for any new construction, single, 2-family home, that they meet the ordinance, hopefully to minimize or maybe not even have any sort of stormwater effect, really.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have a recommendation to receive and place this information on motion to that effect.
I would move to approve that.
Thank you, Lisa. And
I will second it.
a second from Alder Corpus Dax. Any objections to that motion? Or any further discussion from any of the members of the commission? Randy, it looks like you may be wanting to. Nope. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand either mechanically or biologically. All right. Thank you very much. It passes unanimously. Alder LaFave, as the people in
Can
the
I
house
just-
on the
can I
other
just-
side, I'm particularly grateful to you two for raising this question, and I know it's going to be seen to closely by the staff.
Yes, and I hope that the staff would really look at individual situations. I think that's what it has to be. Maybe, you know, more than a broad, you know, ordinance or whatever, because everybody is different. But if they could take that into account, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
thank
know
you.
from-
And I have to get back to my next meeting.
Okay, run. Thanks again.
Yep, bye-bye.
Item number 2 on our agenda then, having approved the recommendation to receive and place on file item number 1 on the residential policy on stormwater runoff. We have consideration with possible action on communication from Alder Barb Dorf, District 1, to estimate potential costs and benefits of proposed Grandview development. And that, we were told, would be discussed, and I believe we turn to Director Vonk for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just make sure.
You are being heard, at least by
Okay.
me.
Great. Just
Yeah.
want to make sure I wasn't muted there. We've talked about a lot, and before my time, proposed development on the very far east side, a mixed-use development to look at providing a wide range of residential housing units, and then also some commercial recreational space, really in the area east of Grandview. Really looking forward to what could become of that development. I know there's been some challenges in terms of moving the project forward when it comes to infrastructure. There's a significant amount of infrastructure that's needed to facilitate the development, primarily stormwater management, but then also, the streets, utilities, everything else involved in there as well. I think, as you well know, in terms of the city's finances, we're challenged in terms of, being able to bond for infrastructure to facilitate development. And our bonding capacity overall at a city is limited, and perhaps Alder Corpus Dax can attest to where we're at in those finances. But in the same aspect, in some cases, we do have to spend money in order to make money, and that is on the development side from getting property taxes and additional revenue. And so I think one of the things in discussing with Alderperson Dorf, and then the potential representative of the property owners, is for us to really look at, what are the costs all involved. And I believe our Department of Public Works has put together some numbers in terms of the infrastructure costs. But then for us to also look at what are the potential benefits in terms of revenues from property taxes from that potential development. And really to go through and run an exercise to see, and again, there'll be some estimates and assumptions here, but just like any other development project, what's the timing of that development, and as taxes come online, what's the payback period for money should we incur any borrowing or bonding costs to do this? What would be the potential upside of this? And so we are recommending that this get referred to staff for us to go through and kind of take a deep dive and maybe present a few different scenarios, some estimates, and come back to the Plan Commission, which then in turn could maybe better help inform our Improvement Service Committee, but also City Council in terms of making decisions about this development. So with that, we are recommending to refer to staff. It's probably going to take us a little while to gather some data and crunch some numbers to come back in September, but just also wanted to provide an opportunity here if there's anything specific that you would like us to include in that analysis, to provide it here so we can come back and include that there.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions they'd like to ask Director Vonk?
All
Commissioner
right.
Daniels. Commissioner Daniels?
I just had a really quick question. What is currently in that location? Is it anything?
It's agricultural land. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
Okay,
some,
it's just,
yep, it's undeveloped.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Do we have a motion then to refer that to staff to bring back to us in September?
Make a
So
motion to
moved.
refer to staff.
We have a motion from Commissioner Petrosky. A second, please. A second from Alder Corpus Dax. Boy, people are really running to the mic today. Thank you. That moves us along. And that takes us, oh, any objections to that? All those in favor?
Aye.
See the hands, yes, indeedy. It passes unanimously, and we are referring to staff the consideration on communication from Alder Barb Dorf involving the potential costs and benefits of the proposed Grandview development to report back to us in September. That brings us to item number 3, consideration with possible action on communication from Alder Chris Weary from District 8 to request an update on any appropriate action on the property located on the corner of South Ridge Road and Lombardi Avenue, owned by Keene Properties. And Paul Newmeyer, I have your name on that.
Sure. I could just give a brief overview on it. Back in 2016, there was a request to do a comprehensive plan amendment and rezoning for the area that was the northeast corner of Lombardi Avenue and South Ridge Road. There were 2 office buildings there at one point, and there were 7 homes. And there's one property that was actually excluded, that it was on Frank Street. So the property owner at that time had plans for development for a 5-story kind of mixed-use office building on that site. It was approved in 2016. It was extended. However, it expired in 2018. So what you see on the screen is kind of the concept, kind of running on the top of the screen or top of the map would be South Ridge. On the left-hand side would be Lombardi Avenue. And that building was tucked up near the corner of South Ridge and Lombardi with parking behind it. For maybe a variety of reasons, the development didn't occur and the property has remained vacant since that time. We have been in discussions with the property owner over the past couple of years, waiting for him to approach us again so we can react to a proposal, but there's nothing to report at this point. Applications have been made for zoning or for site plan change. So at this point, I think it's just simply to receive and place on file.
Do we have any questions from any of the commissioners? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. It's the one way I can tell. Okay, may we have a motion to receive and place on file the request for an update on the property located at the corner of South Ridge and Lombardi Avenue.
So moved.
Commissioner Hanson has moved that. And a second, please, from Commissioner Corpus Dax. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Going to get this straight yet? Okay. No, you can only vote once, Lisa. I'm sorry. Passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. Our 4th item on the agenda is the first of 2 public hearings in advance of 2 other items on the agenda. Each of these public hearings has been properly posted and public notification has been published in the Green Bay Press Gazette. The Plan Commission is interested in hearing any public concerns regarding these agenda items before we take them up, and to offer people another opportunity to speak when we consider the staff recommendation for possible action. We invite your comments during this public hearing and ask that after your name has been called, you state, first of all, your address, secondly, whether you represent a group or association, third, whether you favor, oppose, or are only providing information in this matter, and then, of course, your comments or concerns. We also ask that you confine your testimony to facts related to the proposal at hand and avoid repetitive testimony. You must be recognized by the Plan Commission in order to speak, and Director Vonk will be opening the mics if there are such people here. And we ask that you please address your comments. We will now open the public hearing on item number 4, which is on the request to authorize a conditional use permit for self-service storage at 1929 Verlin Road, submitted by Curtis Klisch, MCR Rentals LLC property owner. And I'm going to ask, before we go further, that Paul Neumeyer provide us a brief introduction to this item.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. This request is the far southern limits of the city of Green Bay, sandwiched up against the village of Bellevue, west of Limekiln Road. It's, I believe, 3 parcels that are on the north side of the street. The request is for a conditional use permit to allow for 4 self-service storage units. So the property is vacant at this zoning, which requires the conditional use permit. And back in 2016, a similar request was made for rezoning and conditional use permit for kind of a campus of self-service storage units to the north of this, all under the same ownership by the same property owner. So again, this is coming before you because of the need for a conditional use permit for 4 self-service storage units. Basically, they're oversized units that do not front the street, but are kind of to the rear of the 3 existing parcels that are there.
Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to speak in favor of this proposal? You'll find a participants spot icon at the bottom of the screen. If you click on that, there's a way for you to raise your hand mechanically. Seeing no one, I would ask, is there anybody here who wishes to speak opposed to this? And is there anyone here who wants to provide information only?
I'm Curtis Klisch. I'm the property owner. I just wanted to let you know that I'm listening here if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Klisch. And can you, we know who you represent. Could you also, oh no, we don't need your address at this point. That'll come later. Does anybody have, we'll ask questions, anything you want to say before we look at this item for consideration and possible action?
No, I think Paul summed it up great.
Good, thank you. That being so, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? This always seems crazy repeating it 3 times, but those are the directions, it's legal. So we will close then this public hearing and proceed to item number 5 on our agenda, number 6 rather, no, number 5, which is consideration with possible action on the request to authorize a conditional use permit for self-service storage at 1929 Verlin Road, submitted by Curtis Klisch, MCR Rentals LLC property owner. And again, Paul, I think you have not, did you share with us already the recommendation of staff on this item?
I did. We don't have much more to share. I think the land use we feel is appropriate. It's consistent with the kind of industrial nature of that particular area. We are recommending approval of the request. We do have 2 conditions that are listed within the agenda, but we are supporting the request.
Thank you, Mr. Neumeyer. And I see we have some pretty pictures on the screen here. Do you need to tell us anything about what we are seeing? It looks pretty clear to me.
Right, we just kind of quickly ran through the comprehensive plan, which is industrial, the light industrial zoning, which is properties located. What you see before you on the screen is the site plan. And those 4 self-service storage units are located to the top of the screen, so to speak. So they don't have that visibility to the street. There is another kind of industrial contractor type use that'll be up front. So again, it's really consistent with the units that are to the north and the surrounding land uses.
Okay. Are there any questions from the commissioners of the staff? Yes, Commissioner Hanson.
I was waiting some time,
Oh,
but I'm
you
now
were
moving
being
to approve the conditions that staff has put in place.
Thank you, and we have a second, it looks like, from Alder.
No, I have a quick
Corpus.
question.
Oh, nope, she has a
I-
question.
yep,
May
yep.
we get a second, first of all, then we'll open it for further discussion.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. And now your question.
Thank you. Paul, did you say that this came through previously to the Plan Commission?
There was a separate request by the same property owner to the north in 2016 that had kind of a campus of self-service storage units. They're really not even like so much visible from the street, but they're there, and they went through a conditional use permit as well. So even though these are just 4 units, we wanted them to come back for that conditional use permit in this case.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. And we have a motion and a second to accept the staff's request on this. And that is there any further conversation or questioning? So we will vote on the motion then to authorize a conditional use permit for self-service storage at 1929 Verlin Road. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hands. And we've got another unanimous vote on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Klisch, for being here. And good luck with the project. You will want to realize that our recommendation goes to the Common Council, which will be meeting on. Director Vonk.
Yes, council meeting will be next Tuesday, the 21st at 6 p.m. and it will be a virtual meeting.
Thank you very much. So you may want to be there for any questions they might have.
Will you guys send out paperwork on that?
There's no additional paperwork that goes out. If you go to the City of Green Bay website, like
Yep.
tonight's meeting, the instructions for joining the Zoom meeting will be posted on there. Usually the agenda and packet is posted on Friday.
Okay.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us, even if just virtually. And then item number 6, a public hearing on a request to amend Chapter 13-522A7 in the Green Bay zoning code regarding temporary uses. And Mr. Newmeyer, again, if you could remind us of the reason for this item.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of in the light of COVID-19, I think our staff wanted to have some more flexibility as far as temporary uses, and we define temporary uses in our zoning code for just that purpose, temporary use that maybe pop up. So we wanted to maybe better delineate a time frame and expand that time frame to allow for businesses that are maybe, or uses that are maybe struggling, that need to some temporary or semi-permanent, I guess, approval to operate within the city. So what's on the screen right now is the current temporary language. It's fairly limited, only 15 days, which isn't much. So we've kind of taken more of a seasonal approach. So we're looking at expanding that 15-day period to 90 days with a renewal period up to another 90 days. So that gives someone a good chance, based on the season to conduct a use. But we also built in some oversight by the zoning administrator to, kind of vet some of those uses. We'll probably vet those through our land use team and maybe our projects team to make sure that those are consistent with surrounding land uses. And we're also going to require a site plan, which I think is fairly understood, but we wanted to clarify that in the language that use can occur. And then finally, we wanted to, give that flexibility where someone could operate a temporary use on a larger basis, so to speak, in a longer period of time, but we didn't want to give them too much string, so to speak, or rope without being able to pull it back. So we added some language. If there are some violations or complaints regarding that use, that we'll be able to enforce on the site plan and have that use cease immediately if there is justification for that. So again, what you see before you is kind of revised language we felt was appropriate. to help facilitate businesses in these strange times to maybe succeed where, they're limited before that with our code language. So, we're recommending approval of these changes based on the ordinance that's attached within the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Newmeyer, and you all will remember that this is a response to a proposal that was, or a question that was raised by Alder Steuer, Mark Steuer at our last meeting. Are there any questions? Oh, this is still the public hearing. I lost track myself. On the item that Mr. Newmeyer has just described for us. Thank you, Paul. Is there anybody here to speak in favor of this draft? And you need again to click on the raise hand. Is there anybody here to speak opposed to the draft? And is there anybody here from the public, or for that matter, Alder Steuer, to speak with information about this item? I think he filled us in pretty thoroughly last time. Does anyone wish to speak on this matter? Does anyone wish to speak on this matter? Does anyone wish to speak on this matter? That being the case, no one, let the record show that no one came forward, and I've therefore closed the hearing. And we'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which relates to the matter we have just been holding the public hearing on, that is consideration with possible action on a request to amend Chapter 13, 522A7 Green Bay Zoning Code regarding temporary uses. Mr. Newmeyer, do you have anything further that you want to add from the staff?
Nothing further to add at this point.
Okay. Are there any questions from the commissioners? And I want to make an apology to DJ Daniels. I'm sorry I missed your question on the chat when you put it up. I'm not quite as techno proficient as you are. So if anybody has any questions, probably best to raise your hand. And Commissioner Daniels. Oh,
I'm just going to get him unmuted here. All right, go ahead.
Okay. I wasn't of course, on the last meeting, but have we been getting a lot of requests for this? You referenced the meeting before. Is this a one-off situation, or have you been getting a lot of these requests?
Mr. Newmeyer, do you want to respond to that? Or Mr. Vaughn, for that matter?
Sure, I could start. I think throughout the years we do get occasional requests. I wouldn't say that it's hugely pressing, but I think by expanding the ordinance, I think it gives those who come in some larger options, or more to work with, so to speak. 15 days isn't much time, so this just kind of broadens the ordinance and gives flexibility. But I don't think we've seen a lot of them come in necessarily as a result of COVID at this point.
Because there is some ask of them that they have to do we see any kind of risk with allowing the 90-day period initially?
As far as a risk, I think we're using the site plan as our tool to enforce on. I don't know that we're running any risk necessarily. I think we have enforcement tools on place with the site plan, and also the site plan if there are issues. So I don't know if there's any risk that I can foresee.
Thank you.
And I might add in, Commissioner Daniels, that Alder Steuer was particularly interested in having some space that would make it possible for Green Bay, like some other communities, to construct some places or to identify some places for outdoor movies. And I note that this particular proposal does, in addition to the 90 days, also offer a possibility of renewing that 90 days for a second term that I think should cover pretty much the kind of thing that Alder Steuer was looking for. Do you agree, Paul, that Alder Steuer's interests are covered by this? I don't think he's
So,
here to speak for
at least on a
himself.
temporary basis, again, with the drive-in, those are possibilities, but it might be a more lengthy process. So I think as a temporary use, this kind of really serves the purpose for the nice weather we have during the summer, but not so much the winter.
Okay. Okay, and Alder Corpus Dax, a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul, would this also cover the parklets that Alder Johnson has been proposing? Do you see this being like that considered a temporary use?
Yeah, I guess it depends where those uses are. This would be on private property. So if those uses are on public property, I think that's under a different ordinance,
Okay.
so to speak. So this would be
Okay.
on properties that are zoned or private, so to speak.
Okay.
Any other questions? May we have a motion on this? The recommendation, whether or not to approve the request per the draft ordinance.
Motion to approve.
Thank you,
Second.
Alder Corpus Dax, and a second from Commissioner Hanson. All those in favor, please signal by raising your hands. Any opposed? We don't want to give our new commissioner the wrong impression. We don't always have quick and unanimous votes, but we'll break you in slowly, okay? And that brings us to the end of the action items. We now have the director's report, and I'll call on Director Vonk for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pulling up my cheat sheet here from the council meeting. Just wanted to welcome Commissioner Daniels to serve on the commission here. Comes highly recommended, so the expectations will be high for performance here. There'll be a test, I think, after the 6th meeting you get about the zoning code. I was really hopeful we'd have a full house here tonight. Unfortunately, on the other side, we lost Commissioner Gilbert. He did submit his resignation effective as of today. So we'll be working to find his replacement on this commission, and then likely at our next meeting be having election of officers as Mr. Gilbert was our chair. So really appreciate Madam Chair Bremer serving in this capacity recently. Again, welcome Commissioner Daniels to our group here. Just in terms of then council actions that happened the last council meeting on Monday, June 29th, Mr. Daniels' appointment was approved, which was quite important. And then in terms of the PUD for Green Bay Packaging, which dealt with a number of dimensional issues out on that project, was approved. And then all of the items that were in the report of the Plan Commission were also approved. Not necessarily part of this group here in terms of action, but along the lines of, again, trying to provide opportunities for businesses in our community to stay vibrant. They did, under the emergency declaration, include expansion of temporary premises for those who didn't serve alcohol. That was something we actually found missing throughout. So again, if somebody is looking to expand their food or beverage service, under the public right-of-way, now administratively they can work through Department of Public Works. Into a park, they can work through our Parks Department. But then on private property, much like the temporary uses proposed here, they can work with us. I just want to make sure that we have these opportunities, for businesses to expand and find ways to make themselves viable. I really appreciate our staff's work. The 90-day period, we kind of looked at it like Traffic Commission does, right? You have a 90-day trial for parking or a stop sign or a yield sign. So I think it's really a great opportunity for us, to test out things. And also, maybe Commissioner Daniels talked about risk. I think also for a business owner, it's a way to, kind of take a calculated risk, a low risk. Let me try this temporarily. Can I try it for 90 days? Hey, if it works, maybe I'll come back with a full site plan and a full development, next year. But hopefully it provides a little more opportunity for businesses to think creatively and try something over, the next few months. So that is all I have for my report this evening.
And I would like to piggyback onto that first of all, to add my welcome to Commissioner Daniels. We're delighted to have you with us. To express my regret that we're losing Tim Gilbert, but I want you to know that Tim is in fine health. He just felt that after 17 years serving the Plan Commission, his absence during the last 4 meetings where we've been limited to Zoom gave him a good and appropriate opportunity to retire. And I also want to acknowledge his fine work and that of Jerry Wisbiski, who preceded him in leaving the commission. And I want to offer to send a card to each of them from all of us. I can do that through snail mail, you know, the old real thing. I don't know how to circulate an e-card if anybody wants to do that so that we could actually add messages to a card. But if I don't see any hands on that, I will just get cards and sign for all of us and tell them how much we've appreciated their contributions to the city.
Thank you, Sid.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I should say, any objections to that? Good, good. Okay. And then the final point of information, just the date of the next meeting. Monday, and I picked up the wrong sheet here. Kevin, help me out.
Oh, I do not have my sheet. August.
Paul's got it.
Here.
Say it again, Paul.
Monday, August 10th.
Monday, August 10th, and thank you very much. And Alder Corpus Dax.
If anyone feels passionately one way or another about face masks over at Protection and Policy, they should be debating that soon.
I
Thank you for
think
letting
that the
us know.
meeting is full though.
Is
Like,
it?
I think the meeting is full. Like, you can't get on the Zoom meeting anymore. There's so many people on it because
That
I'm
wouldn't surprise me.
waiting for the next agenda item after that. So yay.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I've been receiving a lot of emails.
Thank you for that information. Any further information or comments from anybody? Then I'd be happy to
Adjourn.
Kevin's point on this. Anybody who wants to offer a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I think Alder Corpus Dax got to it first. See, now, Mr. Daniels, we're not going to do this again, but I would like to offer you the opportunity to second that motion. All right. Any objections? And vote with your feet and click your leave button, and we'll see you on the 10th of August.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.